Well, hello, good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Fracking Nightmare. Firstly, let me apologise for the fact that there was no edition of Fracking Nightmare last week. Unfortunately, we had a few technical problems after finishing the episode of Humanity vs. Insanity, and literally just a few minutes before we were due to start the show, unfortunately everything went pear-shaped. Well, we're with you tonight, and this will be the last live show for some 7 weeks, as I shall be heading off to Australia, more of which in just a second. But it's becoming increasingly evident that the activist community, and of course peaceful activists, have been labelled in the same breath as ISIS by David Cameron in his recent presentation at the UN, saying that domestic extremists need to be treated in the same way as ISIS. So any moment now I'm expecting a drone to launch some incoming through the studio window. Unfortunately, many a true word spoken in jest. I might just be about 10 years ahead of the time there. Well, today I managed to have 2 of my Facebook accounts deactivated by Facebook, allegedly for being in breach of their terms of use. Now, both accounts had been in use for some years, and some 7,000 Facebook friends have suddenly found themselves without any link to me. Well, I still have 3 active pages. That's Ian Roland Crane. Of course, I was forced to reveal that the R stands for Roland, as Facebook didn't recognise Ian R. Crane as a real person. Fortunately, it did recognise Ian Roland Crane as the real McCoy. But I also have the 2 pages of Humanity vs. Insanity and Fracking Nightmare. But just in case, maybe you want to sign up to one of my newsletters, which you can do either by going to my own website, ianrcrane.com, or frackingnightmare.com. And maybe to be on the safe side, go to both. I can assure you, you will not get multiple newsletters. Anyway, the attack continues. David Cameron and all the other Western world leaders are manipulating their populations into literally totalitarian surveillance and shutdown of any dissent to the orthodoxy pumped out by the government mouthpieces. And David Cameron, of course, has demonstrated the magnitude of his duplicity in recent weeks. This first article is where Cameron was backing Hong Kong rights, so much so that China blocked the BBC website. It says Prime Minister David Cameron said that Britain should stand up for the rights of the people of Hong Kong after more than 2 weeks of pro-democracy protests in the former British colony. Asked about the protest during Wednesday's Prime Minister's questions, Cameron said it's important that democracy involves real choices. The comments came as Hong Kong citizens take to the streets to protest against Chinese restrictions on the 2017 election of the next chief executive. Well, the duplicity is, of course, demonstrated no better than in this photograph here. This is from Parliament Square about a week or so ago. And what we see here is David Cameron shutting down democracy in the UK. Anybody who believes that the UK is a democracy, unfortunately, lives in a delusional state or in a realm of cognitive dissonance. And unfortunately, if they still believe the tripe that is pumped out by the mainstream media, then believe me, in a few short years, they are in for an extremely rude awakening. What is going on in Parliament Square is really quite remarkable. This picture here is from the supposed tarpaulin protest, where the tarpaulin was ruled to be a structure and therefore illegal on Parliament Square. But all across the supposed developed world, we're seeing legislation implemented, making it more and more difficult for people to effectively survive outside of orthodoxy. Even with a sleeping bag being classified as a mobile structure in some EU countries, and therefore effectively illegal to put onto the pavements. So what we are seeing literally is the direct challenge to the freedom of speech. In fact, the limited freedom of speech that we have right now, we have to make the most of. And I emphasize the we, because individually, none of us can really do very much about it at all, but collectively, we can not only be awesome, we are awesome. And the establishment knows it, which is why we are under this pernicious attack. Now, consequently, the government is looking for whatever ways it can to shut down the opposition that the general population are continuing to mount to its corporatist agenda. So much so that for some years now, the process of the judicial review has been a bit of a thorn in the side of the Cameron and, previous to that, the Labour governments. And some 18 months or so ago, this article appeared in The Guardian. Judicial review is increasingly essential, the judges warn. The two most senior judges in the UK have warned the government to be careful about limiting the availability of judicial review, which allows claimants to challenge the decisions of public bodies that may have misused or exceeded their powers. And more recently, literally in the past couple of weeks, lawyers urge peers to reject judicial review restrictions. A combined statement from legal professions says criminal justice and courts bill will have chilling effect on people seeking justice. Well, the article continues. The Justice Secretary, Chris Grayling, says left-wing campaigners. I mean, this is a term, a derogatory term, used to effectively attempt to marginalise anyone who has the audacity to challenge anything that the political elite wish to foist upon the gullible masses. It says left-wing campaigners are exploiting the process of judicial review to frustrate government initiatives. Peers have been urged to reject restrictions on judicial review that will make it harder to challenge government and local authority decisions. The Criminal Justice and Courts Bill, which lawyers claim will have a chilling effect on those seeking justice, goes before the House of Lords this past week. Well, left-wing campaigners. Well, let's just take a look at that, because in Sussex, what we have seen recently is the not-so-left-wing community centred around West Sussex have initiated a judicial review on West Sussex County Council's decision to grant Quadrilla planning permission to return to their Balcombe site. And despite some 800, nearly 900 letters of objection, the West Sussex County Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided to ignore those objections and simply rubber stamp Quadrilla's application. Well, fortunately, the judicial review process is still in place. So, in fact, you couldn't get an area of the country that's probably less left-wing than the residents around Balcombe and West Sussex. The reality is that these are simply campaigners who have done their research and choose to reject an industry that will change the landscape beyond recognition. So we have also the not-so-left-wing community right now in East Yorkshire preparing their application to submit a judicial review in response to East Riding of Yorkshire's recent decision to grant Rathlin Energy the planning extension that they sought at Crawberry Hill. Now, this was an absolute embarrassment, and the video from the hearing is now available, and the audio has been enhanced, and it will be up on my YouTube channel within the next few days. And what you will see is a decision of enormous magnitude, where there were some 340 odd objections, 331 submitted by the due date, another 10 or so read out by the planning officer at the hearing, which you can see from the looks on the faces of the members of the planning committee. They really weren't that interested in at all. And then the discussion on this subject was nothing short of derisory. And the material considerations that were raised in the letters of objection were simply dismissed out of hand. Only one councillor actually had the courage of their convictions to vote against the application for the extension. One councillor even saying that he reluctantly supported the application purely on the basis of fear that there would be an expensive appeal if they rejected the decision. Well, there may well still be an expensive appeal, but it will come from the community that you, councillors, are supposed to represent. Well, if we want to take a look at what it is that these people who oppose this industry are concerned about, then we need look no further than Queensland and New South Wales in Australia, particularly southern Queensland, where in the space of just 5 years, some 3.5, nearly 4,000 wells have been drilled and have devastated the community. Now, the industry has a very unfortunate but very telling term to describe the areas where they intend to start drilling. They are known as sacrifice zones. The industry knows very well that there will indeed be collateral damage, and this is acceptable to the corporatists, those who stand either to make a chunk of money out of the share price or in terms of salary and bonuses. And these sociopaths seem to be able to completely disassociate themselves from the damage that this industry has caused wherever it has become established. Now, within the next few days, I shall be heading out to Australia, but I'm going to be spending some time with Brian Monk and with other residents of southern Queensland and also in New South Wales. But I want you to take a look at this short video. It runs for a little over 12 minutes. But this is Brian Monk and his son David interviewing a family that have had their lives totally devastated by an uncaring, unconventional gas industry. Take a look at this.
The country, home sweet home, 155 acres of the quiet life, enough country to run some cattle, grow your veggies, fruit trees, serenity. This is John Jenkin.
This is QGC, it's Kenya, VG Group, Kenya Fields. These are my neighbours, the worst neighbours you could ever have.
So what's it like?
Like a nightmare. Doesn't stop. 24 hours a day. Roaring, screaming, traffic, compression stations, smells. It rains and it doesn't smell at all. Yeah, what can I say? Sick kids. They don't sleep. When they do sleep, they moan and groan all the time. When they're awake, they pretty much do the same. It's either pain or taste, I suppose. Aaron continually whinges for something to eat, something to drink, trying to get rid of the taste in his mouth. This is my son Aaron, and why we're doing this is because it's his future. We bought the farm for somewhere for him to have for the rest of his life. Aaron was born with quadriplegic cerebral palsy, extra sensitive hearing, and a fast metabolism, which all work against us at the minute. He hears the machines miles away. QGC know this. They have a report from the Cerebral Palsy League stating 3 years ago the things they should do. At least some soundproofing of the house. Still waiting. They have done nothing except for run us in circles and cost us money and health. Yasmin, well, she's come to the point where she sits in a room all day and just doesn't go anywhere. No friends anymore, shone from the community.
Being forced out of town, a town the kids went to school in and were popular in, to now where no one acknowledges them at all.
Why do you think that is?
But yes, I don't know. I'd say that, yes, a lot of the influential people around the town have probably been signed up by the gas company. And, yeah, you
Our
keep...
friends and neighbours have, yes, and they have rung and told us that they can no longer come here and we can no longer go there because they have signed contracts.
With QGC.
Yep.
So it's easier, once you sign their contracts, it's easier not to have visitors.
So confidentiality agreements.
Oh yes, they're good at that. Because if I sign mine, I've got to restrict anybody that comes here to what they say when they leave, about what they heard, felt, smelt, or witnessed the whole time they were here. So for government departments to come, I would have to have my own confidentiality agreements drawn up for anybody to sign that came. Even the therapists for my son, my daughter, and we have sometimes 3, 4, 5 a week, which would be a cost to have them drawn up.
Very few people understand what this is like, do they?
No, I would say, yeah, unless you're living it, you have no idea. It's like, yeah, I'd say like a disability family. We always say in the disability sector, if you don't live it or very closely associated with somebody with it, you won't understand it. And the gas field's pretty much the same. But unless you're involved, you don't understand it or don't want to understand it. All you see is the ads and say it's a good thing, unless you live in it.
I had an asthma-induced heart attack back in May, and I was sent to the PA hospital in Brisbane for a week. I was in a ward with 6 people. 3 of those were gas company workers. Brett Smith sat at our dinner table, told my family this could be a life-changing experience.
This is Brett Smith with North Burnett Mayor Don War. Here he is pictured with Oswald Brothers staff. In an article by Coal Seam Gas News titled Rural Queenslanders Are Collateral Damage, QGC, Brett Smith, the Senior Vice President of Sustainability in the BG Group that owns QGC, Mr. Smith replied that there would be no moratorium and no buyouts, no relocation of impacted residents. Mr. Smith reportedly added, with a project of this size there will be some collateral damage. In QGC's own literature, where you can in fact get the facts, an article titled QGC to Connect Rural Families with Specialist Medical Services. Brett Smith said the project reflected QGC's commitment to rural health services. Community health is a key focus through which we manage social impacts and maximise benefits from our Queensland Curtis LNG project, Mr. Smith said. Vehicles on John's property clearly indicate there's something in the air around the gas field, and yet the question remains. Impacted landholders desperately want to know, what is it on the roof of our cars, on the roof of our houses?
We only live about 4 kilometres away from a reverse osmosis plant. The wind always blows from that direction, the noise comes from that way, the bad smells seem to come from that way. And maybe that's where it comes from.
What's the government told you?
It will be sorted out in due course. Complain, no help.
So while workers are being moved out of the gas fields, it's common local knowledge that workers in the gas industry do not drink local town water. Their drinking water is supplied free of charge John then agrees to show me more of his neighbour's more recent developments.
The more Kenya ponds. On top of a reverse osmosis plant. Pumping station. Oh, they've taken away the main entrance. So they moved it down further, right? Must have their new one open. Such a good, safe industry. Why do they need so many gates and fences?
Air pollution and noise pollution from unconventional gas constitutes harmful, unlawful trespass.
I'm asked by people, how can I help? Get informed. Share this video and other non-industry and non-government information about the unconventional gas industry.
I've got photos of when we've washed it beforehand, and yeah, now it's lost all the paint on top of it. It's got oil running off it every time it rains. Don't know what it is. No one will come out to test what's in the air, what's in the water, but we have to live in amongst it while they hide the truth from us. We have to suffer the illnesses while they hide the truth from us. It won't be long and it'll be affecting your children.
That tugs, surely, at the emotions and the heartstrings of anyone who watches it. What was it that the lady said there at the end of that? She said, it won't be long before it'll be infecting your children. You know, the people of Queensland had many visits from people who had experienced this industry in the US. But clearly it wasn't enough because it didn't have sufficient impact. As Brian Monk himself says, we were caught asleep at the wheel. But this is a repeat of what had happened in the US, where the people of Pennsylvania said, how come the people of Colorado and New Mexico and Oklahoma and West Texas didn't come and tell us what it's like when this industry rolls into town? They did, but no one was listening. And now we've got a situation in the UK where the unconventional gas industry is being given carte blanche by the British government to introduce this industry without caring about the impact that it's had elsewhere. Simply stating that we have the robust regulatory control, which of course we do not. We don't have any regulatory control for this industry. And despite that, we have a failing Environment Agency and Health and Safety Executive who are having their budgets and their resources cut so that they don't have the resources, even if they do have sufficient expertise, which they don't. That article that was referred to by David Monk in his commentary there, this is the Coal Seam Gas News from September the 5th, 2011, a little over 3 years ago. And the statement, rural Queenslanders are collateral damage. And this is from a senior executive within QGC. The article states, the Vice President of one of Australia's biggest coal seam gas companies has reportedly told a resident of a rural residential estate being targeted for gas wells by his company that his community would be collateral damage. Brett Smith, Senior Vice President in the BG Group that owns QGC, was meeting Michael Bretherick, a resident of the Tara residential estate and a member of the Western Downs Alliance, along with others from the company and from the state government. Michael Bretherick suggested that if the company were to take the initiative by ceasing their operations within the Tara estates, begin working on addressing earlier impacts upon residents and the local environment with emphasis on air quality, noise monitoring, soil and water testing, this will avoid confrontation and diffuse an already stressful situation. Mr. Smith replied to this that there would be no moratorium temporary ban, and no buyouts, no relocation of impacted residents, and no cessation of existing operations such as seismic work. Then Mr. Smith reportedly added, with a project of this size, there will be collateral damage. QGC is owned by BG Group. BG Group was one of the companies that was spun off when British Gas was privatised in the mid-1990s. BG Group have their headquarters in Reading, England. This is a British company. And in the long tradition of British companies, then particularly those operating overseas, then their attitude is that the damage to the local communities there is simply acceptable collateral. In reality, they have exactly the same attitude with regard to communities in the UK. This is very telling. This is a screenshot from that short video. This is the water truck going in to the QGC well site, where the workers there are instructed not to drink the tap water. Many of the residents who have complained about the quality of their tap water are provided with bottled water by the companies on the proviso that they sign confidentiality agreements. By comparison, North Yorkshire, the second least densely populated area in the UK, is a veritable metropolis by comparison with southern Queensland. Yet North Yorkshire and East Yorkshire are two of the sacrifice zones in the UK. And by the end of this week, the Department of Energy and Climate Change will have received the tenders in respect of the remaining 46% of the country that is up for grabs by the unconventional gas industry. The brown areas on this map here already licensed. The red stars representing the licenses for underground coal gasification, fracking's ugly sister. But the green area, 46% of the country up for grabs, tenders in by October 28th. Tomorrow, in fact. I am absolutely hoping that every single square metre in that green area is tendered for. Now, the DECC will adjudicate those tenders over the next few weeks and months, and early in 2015 we will know how much of the country has actually become licensed for the exploitation of unconventional gas resources. If that entire area is licensed, 40 million people in the UK better start taking an interest in an industry that has left a trail of devastation wherever it has managed to get its bits in the ground. Now, within a couple of days, I'm heading out to Australia. I'm going to be doing a series of events with the Freedom Summits team over there. But after those events, after the Brisbane event, I'm going to be heading into the Queensland Hills. I'm going to be hooking up with Brian Monk and his family, and we are going to be touring the Queensland and northern New South Wales gas fields. And we're going to be meeting with people who have had their lives devastated in a relatively short time period. We're going to be focusing on people who 5 years ago had really no cause for concern or alarm. But the gas industry has subsequently rolled into town and their lives have been turned upside down. And anybody who believes the government and industry diatribe that the experience will be any different in the UK is literally delusional or cognitively dissonant. Now, this is going to be a very important project because the intention is to do the filming, to get back to the UK, to do the editing, and to have the finished product available for release early in the new year, in the run-up to the British elections. And every MP in this country and every community that is licensed, and indeed those that are not, will need to see firsthand from the video the experience of the people in Queensland and New South Wales. Now, I'm doing this on a wing and a prayer right now. It really is on a very, very tight budget. But if you do feel that you can or are able to contribute to the costs associated with putting this documentary together, then please go to www.frackingnightmare.com and you'll see the donate button on the left-hand side of the page. I hope that along with Marco Jackson, the producer of The Truth Behind the Dash for Gas, that we can put together a product that will contribute to getting this industry shut down in this densely populated country of ours. Join me in part 2.
We think that we live in a free world, and whilst it may look that way in comparison to living under a brutal dictatorship, the reality is that the Western world has never been so restricted by laws, penalties and fines, taxes, debt and poor health. And all this while the Third World struggles in appalling poverty whilst being exploited and raped by the Western world. But make no mistake, there are hundreds and thousands of Australians on the brink of bankruptcy and poverty right now. Our society is riddled with malpractice, divorce, cancer, heart disease, obesity, diabetes and depression. That is not freedom. The fact is that our freedoms and human rights are being removed every day by corporations masquerading as government, by unscrupulous banks, by corrupt pharmaceutical and medical industries, and by the international military-industrial complex that demonstrates nothing short of psychopathic behaviour. The highly controlled media machine bombards the masses with lies designed to keep people in fear, reporting only what works for the corporatocracy and the ruling elite. The world is not well. In fact, if things continue the way they are, our future is bleak. Freedom Summits are here to shine a light on the dark times, drawing together inspirational leading speakers from around the world to collaborate in showing you solutions that can bring about true change. You will leave these summits with tangible, proactive ways to make your life more purposeful, positive and full of hope, moving ever closer to being healthy, fulfilled and free. Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth. Prepare for one of the biggest freedom summits to hit Australian shores. Come and hear from local and international speakers about the topics that seem to elude mainstream narrative, topics that need to be addressed now. Check out just some of the incredible speakers for this November round of summits. Perth, 1st and 2nd of November. Sydney, 8th and 9th of November. Melbourne, 15th and 16th of November. Brisbane, 22nd, 23rd of November.
Welcome back to part 2 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, regular viewers of this show will know that we have been following developments of the intended merger, or acquisition I should say, between iGas and Dart Energy. And here we see on screen the two companies. So if you see their trucks floating around, we've yet to see the new logo of the new company, because during the course of this week, the Competition and Mergers Authority quietly announced that they had decided to accede to the merger between Dart Energy and iGas. Of course, iGas very interested in Dart Energy, primarily because Dart Energy owned a significant amount of acreage around the UK, but also Dart Energy had got a little bit of funding, some £40-odd million from Total, who bought into a couple of licenses on the eastern side of the country, following the French government's decision to outlaw hydraulic fracturing in France. Now, Dart Energy has a bit of an interesting history, because Dart Energy effectively left Australia a little over a year or so ago, There's many explanations and claims as to why Dart Energy left Australia, but so a detailed analysis would suggest that Dart Energy had made some pretty awful acquisitions of licenses in Australia. It looks like they really didn't do their due diligence, and basically they had acquired dog licenses rather than petroleum and exploitation and development licenses, because there was really very little in the way of resources of the areas that they acquired. They were on the brink of bankruptcy, but decided that they would move across to the UK with a stock price that, as you can see from this chart, was pretty much close to the toilet. Well, obviously, with the acquisition of by iGas, then Dart Energy, the management of Dart Energy and the stockholders of Dart Energy are hoping for better things. Well, just a reminder here of the trend of the iGas stock, and I know that a number of people within the iGas leadership team are regular viewers of this program, and of course regular viewers will know that a couple of weeks ago I had my very first iGasm when the iGas stock price dropped below £1 from its high of £1.60 in January of this year. Well, over the last week, since the announcement that the Competitions and Mergers Authority had decided to grant the permission for the acquisition to go ahead, as you can see, the stock climbed from literally barely above 70. In fact, at one point, it was actually below 70. It climbed back up to a peak of just above 90 at the end of last week. But then today, the usual spike on a Monday morning. It's a very interesting trend how iGas stock always seems to spike on a Monday morning. I'll leave that for somebody else to follow up on. But by the end of the day, it had dropped down to just under 80 pence. So pretty much exactly half what it was in January. So here's an article that you're probably not likely to see in the Daily Telegraph, but this is what, if there was any honesty, you would be reading in the Daily Telegraph tomorrow. Bombshell! Atrocities planned in the UK by environmental terror cell Digas. And of course, it's true that if a terrorist was threatening to contaminate Britain's water, then it would be all over the media. But when the corporations are planning to do it, that's a different ballgame. It's treated in the same way as the Occupy protest in Parliament Square. So Digas plans to inject thousands of gallons of poison into the earth, including known carcinogens. Earthquakes are a known consequence. Look no further than, of course, the Fyle Peninsula following quadrillas failed well in 2011. Plan to pollute the water table with chemicals. Which, as we know, both Southern Water and Yorkshire Water have expressed their concerns to the Environment Agency, but basically were told to shut up and go away. All fresh water to be used up and not replaced during the process. Well, not even not replaced, but actually lost to the system forever. Gas leakage affecting livestock and humans alike, just as it has everywhere else in the world where it's been unleashed. And the government accused of complicity in soft kill agenda. Well, of course, if we had a free media, then you might see something like that, but the reality is that you're not. And no doubt, following on from a recent experience with Facebook and AppVod, of course, who did their level best to shut down the UK column channel earlier this year, no doubt every effort will be made to find a way to get Fracking Nightmare and Humanity versus Insanity off the air. But the establishment are failing, of course, to recognise the creativity of the increasing number of people who are joining the alternative community and recognising the lies, the deceit and obfuscation of the establishment. Well, meanwhile, Digas are carrying out their seismic survey around Ellesmere Port. The thumper trucks are somewhat conspicuous by their presence. And the Ellesmere Port community basically following them around town and making sure that the employees of Atlas sorry, it's Tesla. I think it's Tesla in Ellesmere Port, that Tesla know that they do not have the local community's approval. Well, Ellesmere Port camp had a rather devastating experience, I think a couple of nights ago, where there was a mysterious fire in the kitchen tent there. Fortunately, there were no serious casualties. A couple of people did suffer from singed hair and breathing some smoke. There's no suggestion, or at the moment anyway, of anything underhand occurring. But unfortunately, it has put a little bit of a dampener, no pun intended, on the protest community there. So if there are people watching in the Ellesmere Port area, then IGAS, of course, will be celebrating the misfortune of the protection community, and will no doubt try and take advantage by moving infrastructure onto the site. So if you're in the area, you might want to get down and maintain a physical presence at the entrance to the industrial estate where IGAS have their site there. But it's not all going their way, I'm pleased to say. Earlier this week in Duddleston, and this is from BBC News Shropshire, which of course doesn't get reported or broadcast beyond Shropshire in the interests of restricting the flow of important news. And this was the headline: Duddleston methane drilling, decision postponed. So that's what's being pumped out by the mainstream. It was postponed. So let's take a look at what is actually in the text of that article. A decision over plans to drill for methane in North Shropshire has been postponed by the local authority. Dart Energy has applied for permission to dig a test borehole to check for coalbed methane on farmland in Duddleston near Ellesmere. About 100 people protested outside a Shropshire Council planning meeting on Friday afternoon. Councillors said they opposed the bid. Now, the bid was opposed on the basis of 8 votes to 0. 8 councillors with cojones versus the 11 councillors without cojones in East Yorkshire. One, of course, did. But 8 councillors in Shropshire basically turning down Dart Energy's planning application to drill an exploratory well in Shropshire. The article continues, it says, councillors said they opposed the bid, but following legal advice, agreed to postpone a decision until November. They unanimously said they were minded to reject the application, but officers and a legal advisor stepped in. Officers are now expected to carry out further research before the next planning meeting. Well, my insiders tell me that actually that's not quite what occurred. The planning committee voted 8-0, a resounding defeat for Dart Energy's planning application. But the chairman and the council's planning officer went into panic. Clearly, they had no anticipation whatsoever that the vote was, one, going to go against Dart Energy, but not at least go against them 8-0. So they basically said, oh my goodness me, it's gone against the way we thought it was going to go. And they came up with this cock and bull that they now have to seek legal advice. And of course, what they're going to do is they're going to tell the councillors, you know, if you continue with this objection, then there's going to be a very, very expensive appeal. And, well, the council can't afford it. Well, let me put the record straight, because if the council decides to overturn that decision, there will be a very, very expensive judicial review. And until such time as David Cameron and his corporatist masters are able to repeal the Human Rights Act and the rights of the communities to initiate judicial review, then that process will be utilised to the full. So the challenge here to Shropshire County Council is to maintain your stand. You made the right decision. You made the decision not only on the basis that you had done your research, you also made the decision on the basis that you acknowledged your fiduciary responsibility in representing the community. And good on you. So this is a graphic produced by the local community there. And it absolutely illustrates the process of raising awareness and getting due process to be followed. The protection camp there, the preemptive protection camp, being absolutely catalytic in being a community focus, drawing people down to the camp to find out what's going on, to have a cup of tea, a piece of cake, whatever, and see for themselves and not be preached at, but simply encouraged to use their own powers of investigation, to use their capacity for independent thought, and instead of simply accepting what the British government and the British media tells them is good for them, to look at it for themselves. Public meetings, absolutely no better way to get the message out than with public meetings. And of course, good old demonstrations in the town square on a Saturday morning. So let's keep all eyes on Shropshire and wish the people of Shropshire and of Duddleston every success in achieving an outright ban on fracking within Shropshire. Meanwhile, in Sussex, the awareness there at Horse Hill, just north of Gatwick Airport and just to the west of the town of Hawley. And after a number of weekend events, we had this lock-on there with a couple of wonderful ladies, Izzy and Sammy. They're obviously preventing Magellan Horse Hill Developments from getting their trucks in there. And basically, this is a response against the Surrey Police, who have effectively stated, just like Humberside Police, that they will not be allowed to conduct any form of active, peaceful protest. Of course, Horse Hill Developments, David Lenegas, who we reported a couple of weeks ago, has stated that, we're not fracking and this is a conventional well. Yes, David, we know it's a conventional well. But we also know you're drilling down to 8,680 feet for the sole purpose of extracting core samples so that Magellan can establish the viability of the shale deposits in the Weald Basin. And, we all know very, very well that George Osborne, here he is. Yeah, you couldn't hear that, but that was me listening to George Osborne announcing a little over a year ago that shale gas is part of the future and we will make it happen. Well, our message, of course, to George Osborne, the British government and to the unconventional gas industry is that shale gas has absolutely no part in our future or anybody else's future, come to that, and we will be doing our level best to making sure it doesn't happen. So join me again in part 3 of Fracking Nightmare.
So where are the gas wells? Number 1, Tara Township. Here's the town of Tara. Let's zoom out and find a common radius measurement. So we're looking at about 18 kilometres, so that'd put 6 gas wells within 18 kilometres. So number 2, Chinchilla Township. So here's the township of Chinchilla. We zoom out, we get our 18 kilometres again, which gives us about 10 gas wells within the 18 kilometre radius. Now number 3, Dalby Township. Okay, so the Dalby Township, let's zoom out, get to our measurement tool, and for Dalby we end up with 1 gas well within a 19 kilometre radius. Number 4, the unlucky ones in the gas fields. This is QGC BG Group's Kenya gas fields processing plant on the edge of several residential estates and farms. The evaporation ponds alone cover almost 5.5 kilometres. So let's put it in perspective. Let's zoom out from the town of Chinchilla and make a comparison. The entire width from town end to end is 3.21 kilometres. The length is about 3.29 kilometres. The evaporation ponds would cover Chinchilla 1.5 times. Let's zoom out from one of QGC's gas fields. Yes, the dots are gas wells. Yes, the industry isn't even exporting yet. Go to our measurement tool and we have around a 22 kilometre radius. Now I'll give you an example of just how safe human beings will be throughout Australia with the unconventional gas industry. QGC's Catewell cluster is in the heart of a residential estate. So Toowoomba, unconventional gas has its eyes seriously fixed on you and your surrounds. So no gas wells within a 32 kilometre radius, but if we go for a flight out to your west, you'll see the multinational giants aren't too far away. We pass Mount Irving, Mount Moriah, West Prairie, Cecil Plains, Grassdale, Cumberilla. Are you enjoying the flight? Bilby, Kogan, Weambilla. I can't see why people are whinging. This should be in everyone's backyard, shouldn't it? Here's QGC's tenements, Origin Energy's tenements. Oh, hang on, they're actually multinational corporations. Do you want this where you live? And ending with miles. And how about a flyover from Cecil Plains to central Queensland? This is beautiful farming country. Unfortunately, those that are fixated on containment of the unconventional gas global giants are delusional. Prime agricultural land represents easier, more accessible drilling. It is not protected. As the government has indicated, it does not have the right to take a landholder's right to negotiate with a gas company away from them, even if they are on prime agricultural land. Zooming out and moving further north now, you can see we've really been asleep at the wheel. Zooming in, the blurred clusters turn into definable spots, each one potentially causing irreversible damage to the country. I just cannot stress enough that a majority of the unconventional gas wells are not yet in production. The true effects will become undeniable upon export. What's the scale of damage over Queensland so far? The gas industry is only in first gear in one state, covering over 1,000 kilometres long, over 300 kilometres wide. Some very credible projections put total potential unconventional gas well numbers in excess of 200,000 for Queensland alone. It is not the intent of this video to encourage a defeatist thought process. On the contrary, unconventional gas has been heavily wounded in the eyes of the public. Our window of opportunity still exists. Think national, not in my backyard. Stop the first export train, the Surat Basin to Gladstone's Curtis Island, and stop the unconventional gas industry in this country.
And welcome back to part 3 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, that short animation was produced by David Monk, son of Brian Monk, and it illustrates the degree with which this industry has been able to establish its presence in southern Queensland in such a short time. And I shall be in the heart of the gaslands, around the Tara gas fields, around Chinchilla, through November, meeting with those communities that have been significantly impacted by this industry. Now, for the record, I don't drink, I don't use any drugs, psychoactive substance, I don't smoke, I'm a careful driver. So if anything untoward should occur whilst I am in Australia, be very, very suspicious. In reality, of course, the establishment should wrap me in cotton wool, because I'm sure they are well aware that if anything should happen to me, even if I should have a most unfortunate accident, then there will be a significant number of people who will never believe it was an accident. And the information that I've been putting out will go viral with your help, of course. So, I have spent the last few weeks in North Yorkshire, an area that is the second least densely populated part of the UK, yet is a relative metropolis by comparison with southern Queensland. Over the last 2 weeks, I have been across the Vale of Pickering. These are the two licences across the Vale of Pickering there. Of course, the rest of North Yorkshire up for grabs right now. But the two licences, that's Moreland Energy in the grey scale, and Third Energy, which is 97% owned by Barclays Bank in the blue shading there. So if you have any investments with Barclays Bank and you're concerned about this industry, either let them know or move your money. Well, here's a photograph taken by the organisers at the Gilling event. Now, I discovered villages in North Yorkshire that I had certainly never come across before. Over the course of 10 events, we had some 800 people through the doors, including, I'm told, some 60 local and district councillors. We had a number of people come along to these events who, when they arrived, were quite antagonistic. But the most extreme example was a gentleman who came along to the Thornton-le-Dale event and was very antagonistic at the start of the evening, but by the end of the evening was helping to put the chairs away and wanted a lot more information. Well, many of the people in the area weren't familiar with this. This is the well site at Kirby Misperton, and this is a producing well. It's a conventional gas well producing from the Kirkham Abbey formation. But Third Energy are undoubtedly looking to exploit the unconventional resources in the Boland Shale, which runs, of course, right across the country. And in fact, in their applications, they have stated that they are planning to drill down to the depths where they can extract core samples from Boland. Now, the current application is for a well at Ebbston, or actually on Ebbston Moor, about 3 miles north of the village of Ebbston, right on the edge of Dorby Forest there. And this is a random picture of houses that are currently for sale in Ebbston. And at the moment, of course, the number of properties for sale there is probably no more or less than one would expect to see at any time of year. But what is interesting is that the couple that were on the point of actually making an offer on one of those properties came along to one of the events last week, and needless to say, they are now not going to be pursuing their purchase, not least until Third Energy determine whether they are or are not going to get permission to start drilling on Ebbston Moor. And in addition to that, Third Energy actually want to drill a re-injection well to save having to transport the radioactive waste product away from the well, the volume of which would equate to about 70 odd trucks a day, every single day, for about 15 years. Here's the road network that they would have to follow. This is the main road through to Scarborough. You have Ebbston Village there if you turn left, and to turn right, then basically you go up towards the moor. As you can see here, it's very reminiscent in some respects to Barton Moss Road. It may not be a footpath, but it's a single track road. Passing places have been created, and as you can see, the works traffic is being directed there. Well, this is what it looks like. It is a very narrow lane. And although you can't really see it here, it actually is quite a steep incline up to the southern edge of Dorby Forest. And at the top of the lane there, this is the track that the infrastructure will have to go down to get to the well site down on the edge of the trees there. So not only is there an issue with the fact that Third Energy, of course, are ultimately intending to exploit the unconventional gas resources, as indeed is a term of their licensing agreement. But we are also very concerned about this, because the re-injection well, of course, opens the proverbial door, maybe even the floodgates, for the government agenda for implementing geological disposal. This is a white paper. It's freely available online. It was published in July of this year. And in this 55-page document, it actually talks about the 100-year agenda to turn the UK into a nuclear waste dump. Indeed, part of the agreement with EDF for them to build the Hinkley B power station is to take France's toxic nuclear waste and deposit it in the deep wells in the UK. So this is the government and the unconventional gas industry developing a strategy to use the deep unconventional wells and the re-injection wells at some later date for waste storage, including nuclear waste. And part of the amendment to the infrastructure bill that is currently going through the House of Lords would grant companies the opportunity to deposit anything beneath people's properties without advising them. So, of course, we have the changes to the trespass law going through, where gas companies could drill under people's properties without telling them that they're drilling under there, and also now to be able to deposit anything they so desire, or have permission to, in theory, under people's properties. So, despite the fact that 99% of correspondence during the consultative period was against these modifications to the trespass law, basically the corporatist puppets that sit in Westminster have basically said, well, thanks for letting us know what you think, but we're going to do it anyway. Well, on the way back from North Yorkshire, I took the opportunity to drop by East Yorkshire at Crawberry Hill, and on Saturday, I went down to West Newton, which I have to say in of itself is a very interesting experience, and more about West Newton and some of the activities there in a future programme. But this was East Yorkshire residents coming down to take a look at the abomination that Rathlin Energy have created at West Newton, subjecting local residents to appalling smells. Of course, Rathlin Energy being somewhat less than transparent. And what you see here is the scaffolding around the wellhead. And I have to say that the picture doesn't really do it justice, because Rathlin Energy have created something around the wellhead that is more Heath-Robinson than, well, Heath-Robinson. And I have to say that in all my time in the oil industry, I never saw anything like this. I mean, this scaffolding looks like something that you might expect to see, or might have expected to see, in the Middle East about 20 years ago, when a lot of the construction was done by third country nationals, Indians and Pakistanis, using bamboo. It looks like here, like whoever put this together probably did their apprenticeship in Dubai. Well, you know, Rathlin have problems at West Newton. The well is clearly once again causing them some concern. It's looking very much like, once again, they have unexpected pressure. Of course, I wish I could tell you precisely what the problems are, but Rathlin, the Environment Agency and the Health and Safety Executive are being somewhat less than transparent, probably because they don't really know. But a couple of weeks ago, Quadrilla personnel were spotted at the Rathlin well site and, called it a hunch. But there is the distinct possibility that Rathlin have experienced exactly the same kind of well failure as Quadrilla did. Maybe they have damaged the well at depth. Maybe we're only going to find out once those well reports are made available via Freedom of Information request, which they will be. But all of this adds to the cause for concern that the planning committee of East Riding Council elected to ignore the 340 odd objections that had been submitted and simply rubber stamp Rathlin's planning application to return to Crawberry Hill for another 18 months. Well, meanwhile, of course, the behaviour of Rathlin's security firm, Beacon Security, based in Lewes, Sussex, becomes even more outrageous. And last week, a local activist, a local person, part of the Hull and East Yorks anti-fracking community, was arrested. Now, the Humberside police have been gunning for this individual for a while because he is so active. And although Humberside police deny that there is any memorandum of understanding between them and Rathlin, that would be a first, because we know for a fact that there was indeed a memorandum of understanding between Quadrilla and the Sussex Police and IGAS and the Greater Manchester Police. And, of course, it will eventually come to light. But the Humberside police are behaving exactly as Judge Ferguson described Greater Manchester Police. They are behaving as the corporate enforcers. And this particular individual was arrested for running a stick along a fence, and that has been interpreted as criminal damage. Now, I have seen the video footage of this individual's arrest, and it is truly disturbing. And this footage will, of course, go public just as soon as the legal representatives grant permission to do so. But it gets worse, because that individual has also now been charged with possession of a controlled substance. Now, I have got to know this particular individual over the past few months, and a less likely person to be in possession of a controlled substance I cannot imagine. So it seems that Humberside police have stooped to depths not even contemplated perhaps by Greater Manchester Police. Well, if they did contemplate it, they didn't go ahead with it. But Humberside police have excelled themselves and demonstrated themselves to be a criminal organisation. And Justine Curran, the Chief Constable of Humberside Police, needs to get a grip. Because Humberside Police, just like Greater Manchester Police and just like the Sussex Police, are going to be subjected to some pretty significant legal challenges and quite possibly compensation claims for their behaviour. They are not upholding the law. Thankfully, the judiciary are still upholding the law. Were it not for the British judiciary, I wouldn't hesitate to say we are in the full grip of a corporatist, totalitarian state. The only thing between the people of this country and a totalitarian state right now is the judiciary, and David Cameron and his cohorts in Westminster are doing everything they possibly can to remove the last vestiges of our defence. As we discussed earlier with Ken O'Keefe on humanity versus insanity, individually, there's not very much that we can do about it. It's up to us. It's we. And the thing that perhaps is the greatest threat to us, it was finally acknowledged in The Guardian earlier this month, with this article, How Clicktivism Has Changed the Face of Political Campaigns. I detest petitions with a vengeance. Vars, Change.org, 38 Degrees and all the others, as far as I'm concerned, they are parasites on the industry of trying to bring about change. They disenfranchise people. They disempower people. Too many people think that once they've clicked on a petition, that's all they need to do. It's not enough. Petitions are a form of social safety valve, just like one-day protests. Nobody gives a damn. Even as we've seen before, when petitions are submitted to local authorities requiring them to hold debates on something, then they will simply sit there, allow the person to speak for 5 minutes and then say, thank you very much, next. So, they don't care. What changes things is people getting involved. There's nothing better than the public meeting to bring about changes in mindsets, as we have seen in North Yorkshire over the past 2 weeks. And my sincere thanks to the community in North Yorkshire for all the efforts in putting on those events and, of course, raising awareness of them, so that 2% of the adult population of Ryedale are now somewhat better informed than they were a month ago. There's a couple of events coming up. One coming up in, I think this is in Sheffield. And this is on Thursday, the 30th of October, so this coming week at 6:30 p.m. It's a public debate So this is run by the Institute of Mechanical and Civil Engineers and the Institute of Engineering Technology. Some interesting speakers, but if you're in the area, please go along. Please check it out and make your voices heard. And then one that I was made aware of literally before we went on air this evening, and I've literally pretty much cut this straight off of the Fracking Nightmare Facebook page. And this is posted by Julie Wasmer. So this is on November the 19th at 7:30 p.m. In Augustine House, Canterbury Christchurch University, Kent. The title of the debate is Engaging Sociology, a Public Debate on Fracking in the UK. Chaired by the university's Dean, featuring Nick Riley, a geologist. Well, I've come across Nick Riley before. Interesting that he actually is very much pro-fracking. Professor Paul Stevens, who actually tends to be somewhat more balanced. Mike Hill has some interesting views. David Smythe, absolutely worth going along to just to hear what David Smythe has to say. David Smythe has put together some superb analysis of the geological faulting in the UK and explains why it is that the UK should never become a target for this abomination. Councillor Ian Driver, of course, who actually came into the media some time ago following some freedom of information requests to the Met Police, where it was revealed that they had compiled a massive file on the activities of this peaceful campaigner. And last but by no means least, of course, Julie Wasmer, who is a tireless campaigner and is also a member of the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England in Kent, where she has been central to the exposure of the Chief Executive Officer of Rathlin, David Montagu-Smith, and his duplicity in being also chairman of the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England in North Hants, and also using that position to lobby central government to remove renewables subsidies in favour of unconventional gas exploitation. Well, there we have it. Let's go back to that slide. Fracking Nightmare. Coming to your town soon. 64% of this country is potentially going to be targeted. 40 million people in this country. It will only come to your town if you don't participate in this and make your voice heard and stop this abomination. So this is the last Fracking Nightmare now for a few weeks, because I head out to Australia in a couple of days. But I will be sending back reports from Australia from time to time. And of course, I'm very much looking forward to spending my time with Brian Monk and meeting with the people in the gas fields of southern Queensland. Thanks for joining us. Spread the word.